Welcome to this episode of The Setup. Today I want to talk about the arrows and the broadheads that I'm going to be shooting this fall. So I'm going to grab them. They're right here. So let's look at the broadheads first. Last year I shot the EXO 3 blade. This is a mechanical forward opening broadhead. And I also shot their Destrukt, and that's a 3-blade fixed blade. And I was really surprised that I liked that fixed blade head as well as I did. I mean, I've been a mechanical shooter for, 1997, I think, is when I switched, 95, 96. So that's 30 years, almost 30 years of shooting mechanical heads. And I did that because of the accuracy. You know, there's nothing about the mechanicals that made sense to me other than the fact that they're super accurate. And I ranked accuracy as the #1 feature of any broadhead. #2 for me would be penetration, and #3 would be a close third would be durability. So again, I was really impressed with how accurate the little Destrukt fixed blade head was. I shot a number of deer with it. So, you knew it was going to be, it's got to take something kind of special to pull me away from a broadhead that basically has no moving parts, no downside. So the reason that I shot the EXO 3 when I did is just a little bit larger cutting diameter. You still maintain the same level of accuracy, obviously. A mechanical head, you don't have that wind planing effect that you get with a larger fixed blade head. The little Destrukt has so small of surface area on the blades that it gets almost no planing. So planing is when the front of the arrow tries to steer the arrow in its path. So you shoot it and you want the tail of the arrow to follow the nose. You know, the fletching follows the broadhead perfectly. It goes down range, hits exactly where your field point arrows hit. But then you throw a broadhead on the front, and especially one that has larger surface area on the blades, and it wants to steer the arrow. And that can be a real problem, especially if it's a little bit windy out, or you make a bad release and you got a little bit of a, arrow coming out that's not perfectly straight. Anyway, my point is, I learned the hard way back in the mid-90s that I was better off with mechanical heads. So it's just, like I said, it's really cool to see a fixed blade head that can compete with mechanicals from the standpoint of accuracy. So now I'm going to look at a new head that they've come out with for this year. I'm going to try this one. Everybody's going to the rear deploy mechanical heads, and I understand the advantage of that. You know, it clicks open, and now you've got a full-sized, this one's a 2-inch cutting diameter broadhead that more or less locks into that open position. This is called the RD2, rear deploy 2-blade, from EXO broadheads. And that's if I haven't said it, I hope I have, but this is a division of B3 Archery, is who makes these broadheads. So I'm going to try this one. Like I said, it's going to be hard to get me away from this little fixed blade head. I can hit field point accurate out to 40 yards, which is as far as I'll shoot at a whitetail. I know people that have shot these things out to 100, and they still feel comfortable that the grouping is good enough, even at that distance with the fixed blade head. But it'll be fun to try something new, and there are some benefits to the rear deploy broadheads. Penetration is a little bit better because you don't have to fold the blade forward back. It just flips open from the back, so you get a lot better entrance hole. So potentially you get a better blood trail. And, again, you got the accuracy of a mechanical head. These snap shut, so there's no bands. There's a friction fit, it just clicks into place. So when you shoot it, it stays in that undeployed position, and then when it hits, just the impact kicks the blades open, and then it locks in that open position. So it'd be a pretty devastating broadhead, no doubt about that. So I do look forward to giving those a try, and I'll let you know as the season comes on. I start shooting a few does and maybe a buck or two, hopefully, how this broadhead does. So now let's talk about arrows. And I get this question every once in a while from people about, you know, what is the perfect arrow for whitetails, or what's the best arrow weight? And, you know, you need a trade-off. We're not looking at long-range shooting. Generally, you're 15 to 25 yards, maybe 30. I mean, I'll shoot as far as 40 sometimes, but the biggest problem with whitetails is not whether you can hit, you know, a small spot at 40 yards, it's whether the deer is still going to be there when the arrow gets there. So your maximum range really isn't determined as much by your ability to shoot the bow well as it is by the deer staying in position until the arrow gets there. So they move, string jumping. And I don't want to get into that in this episode, but I've done videos on that. You know, I'll put a link in the description where I talk more about string jumping. But the point is, 40 yards is a long shot at a whitetail. So you don't need a super fast arrow that compensates for a lot of trajectory differences from misjudging the range of the shot. So you're not going to be off by much. Plus, normally you can pre-range locations so you know how far you're shooting. You know if it's 35 yards or if it's 31 yards, normally. So again, a super fast arrow doesn't buy you a whole lot. Might help a little bit with how far the deer drops if he hears the shot or she hears the shot in this whole string jumping scenario. So it's important from that standpoint. That's one side of the trade-off. The other side of the trade-off is the penetration energy and the quiet shooting of the bow. So the heavier the arrow is, the more energy that it soaks up from the bow, because less of it is left vibrating in the limbs and in the string. You know, like if you hear a bow clang and it sounds really loud after the arrow's gone, pretty good chance that arrow was really light and it didn't soak up very much of the energy of the bow when it was moving forward. So that's the other side of the trade-off. You want a quiet bow that produces, you know, a good penetration, an arrow that produces good penetration, but you want to balance that with, you know, a faster arrow that doesn't allow the deer to drop quite as far if it hears, you know, if it hears the sound. So that's a long kind of background. I like an arrow for whitetail hunting that weighs somewhere between 6 and 6.5 grains per pound of maximum draw weight. So let's say you're shooting a 70-pound bow. So 6 grains per pound would be 420 grain finished weight arrow. 6.5 would be 450 grains, somewhere in that neighborhood, 455 grains. That's going to get you that good compromise between pretty fast arrow flight and, you know, soaking up energy from the bow and a quieter shot. Again, you know, everything is a variable. You know, different people shoot in different situations. Most of the time, 40 yards and in, an arrow in that weight range is going to be about perfect for most people. I'm going to be shooting the FMJ again this year, I think. I don't have any reason to switch. I like the smaller diameter of these arrows. You know, you get a crosswind, and there's not as much surface area for the wind to push against to move the arrow to the side. On hit, on impact, you get better penetration because the arrow diameter is really small, so you don't get the resistance of the arrow going into the animal. Those are the key points, I guess, for these smaller diameter arrows like this. So that's pretty much a wrap-up of what I'm going to be shooting this year and why. I'll do a update once we get into the season. I don't have any reason to suggest one of these over another. I used to be all about mechanical broadheads, but I'm starting to change my viewpoint now after shooting this little Destrukt. So keep checking back. Sometime in probably the end of October, I'll do an update on how I feel about the trade-offs in these these broadheads at that point. Well, I appreciate you joining me. I'll see you right back here again soon for the next episode of The Setup. And remember to always dream big.